jury really is out, isn't it, as to just how long it will take the global economy to come out of this depression. It really will depend on just how the global community manages the disease, whether there'll be a second wave, for example. But what should governments and financial institutions do to try and soften the blow and to speed up the long, slow recovery? Well, that's what we're here today to discuss. And I'm really delighted to be joined by two Nobel laureates. Both held the position of Chief Economist of the World Bank, Professor Joseph Stiglitz and Professor Paul Romer. Thank you very much for joining me here at the summit. So the world is in crisis mode. Central banks have already unleashed really huge stimulus programs to act as a security blanket and try and stimulate growth and soften the blow. But is this enough? Joseph Stiglitz, what do you think? What else needs to be done? What action needs to be taken right now?
So first, it should be clear that the magnitude of the spending in the United States, almost $3 trillion, was a lot of money by anybody's accounts. But it was more like a bazooka or a fire hose. It wasn't very well targeted. And now we face another problem. It doesn't look like it may be sustained. And it wasn't comprehensive enough. And so let me just talk about some of the reasons for these concerns. One of the objectives of the money was to avoid a huge increase in unemployment. It was important to keep workers attached to their firms. Many countries felt the same way and succeeded. There were alternative designs to the program. New Zealand, Denmark, a number of countries actually designed programs that at much less cost kept people connected with the firms. The United States has had the largest increase in unemployment of any of the countries. And even those who were as or worse affected by the disease itself.
How can they deal with this crisis? Because as you say, that will have a knock-on effect on the world economy. Paul Romer, what's your view on this?
Well, I think this is a context where we've got to think of a multi-front kind of approach. There are the traditional kinds of stimulus measures, the traditional kinds of support for jobs and unemployment, which are very important. In this particular crisis, we have a shock which is persisting. It's not like a liquidity crisis in the banking, like a bank run that is over in a week or two, less than a month. We've got an ongoing shock because of this pandemic. This shock is making people afraid to go out and do things like go to a restaurant, go see the dentist, go do all of the kinds of things that are part of economic activity. And so we need to have a clear vision of what the government can do to remove and reduce the shock. Now, as this bears on the global context, there's a question about why we have not seen as much spread of the virus in poor countries as we've seen in rich. There are several things that could be going on here, but one could be that this is a kind of a pandemic of affluence. There are things like air travel, the kind of mobility that we have in rich countries, which meant that the spread came first to the most affluent, the most connected places. But that spread will reach other countries. So we may be facing in 6 months, a year, high levels of death, high levels of fear about returning to normal activity in many countries around the world.